Welcome to First Class Counselors, where we give camp counselors insider tips and advice on how to make a camper summer the best it can be.
And whether you are brand new to the camp world and it's your first staff training that you're expecting, or you have been at staff training for a couple of years, you've sat on that floor, you've listened to some great topics. Whether or not you're new or returning, our job is to help you be the best staff member you can be, so that you can make the summer the best it can be for the kids at camp. And that's why we do first class counselors.
My name is Oliver. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the Director of Camping Services at YMCA Camp Westwood with the Pawtucket YMCA in Coventry, Rhode Island. We are a day camp that is planning to rebuild and introduce overnight camp in 2025. But we got day camp coming this summer, so we're still pretty busy.
And my name's Matt Wilfred. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the executive producer of podcasting and a consultant with Go Camp Pro. Oliver, it's been a little bit.
It is. I think we got through our intro without too much tripping. So, but there's a really good reason why. Obviously, we're getting ready for summer, just like any other camp professional in our field. But you have a really big reason why we've been a little absent. It's not your fault. It's exciting news. It's a good reason to not be on the air. So come on, share with everybody. Tell us what's going on.
Yes, well, I'm so glad, first of all, that we're back together, but it's been for a good reason. My partner and I just welcomed our first kiddo into our family. So, baby Georgia is 2 months old and a little bit today, as mid-May that we're recording, and she's great. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of good work, just like camp is a lot of really good work. It's not the same as being a camp director, but sometimes we got to reprioritize our time. And so I'm glad that I was able to take a breather, but so glad to be back doing this podcast. And Georgia was a little bit of the inspiration for this episode. I'm not going to lie.
I'm excited. I think, coming from the point of view, we've been doing this podcast for a long time now. Like, I mean, I think this is like year seven. So you and I have gone through some pretty significant like life events,
Yeah.
whether changing jobs or moving or all these different things. So
Yeah.
it's wild to me because yeah, you live in Canada. I'm down here in the States, but it's kind of cool, as we go through our lives together a little far away, but we can go through a little bit of our life history by, re-listening to our podcast one day. So maybe Georgia will, when she's older and ready to listen to these podcasts and she's becoming a first class counselor herself, she can go back and kind of watch, dad grow up as a camp professional throughout the years. So I think it's really cool. Congratulations on becoming a father. It's such an exciting thing. Um, and let's record one for Georgia today. Today is dedicated to her.
Yeah. So today's topic is based on there's a famous parenting book for those of you who don't know, called "What to Expect When You're Expecting." It's all, it's the Bible in some people's circles about when it comes to parenting. So this episode is what to expect when you're expecting staff training. We've talked a lot in the past about what to expect from summer camp. We did a great episode this season called "Is This a Cult?" talking about why camp is this weird and awesome and also very weird. Emphasis on weird place. And then last season we wrapped up with an episode of what can you do to kind of just prepare for the summer, and we gave some pro tips in there. So we've covered a little bit about this, like prepping for camp, but I realized that as camps all over North America are prepping for staff to arrive, that camp directors right now they're putting their final touches on staff training. And staff training is this entirely different world. It's a world within a world, right? Because you have this intense training period that is so different than school because staff training often, even in the day camp world, is an all day back to back kind of thing. Very little breaks, because there's a lot of information that has to be packed in. So it's school, but way better and arguably more tiring. So, but we want to emphasize throughout this episode that it's an extremely important time for you to prepare for the work ahead, because being a great counselor and working with kids isn't always intuitive for everybody, but that doesn't mean you can't be a great camp staff. And that's why the directing team and the senior team at your camp are working so hard to make a really intentional staff training. So this episode is dedicated to making sure you know generally what to expect. So we're going to cover what you're going to physically feel, maybe mentally, or what it physically looks like, what it's going to feel like, what it might emotionally bring up in you, and we'll give you some of our pro tips on how to thrive in this busy and amazing season or part of camp.
Yeah, so let's get started. We've kind of broken down the episode into three categories, which are kind of like Matt's and I three go to. So it's, what is the physical thing you're going to experience during staff training? What's the mental and what's the emotional? So we're going to kind of go through each one and we'll give you some tips as we go through. So I'll kind of get us started. We're going to start with physical. And the number one thing that I want you to think about when it comes to physical is time, right? Your body, right, may not be used to the amount of time that's going to go into the staff training and some of the things that go into it. So even if like you're an athlete, right, like a lot of you might be college athletes or something like that, and you're thinking like, oh well, like I run and jump and I swim and do all this kind of stuff all day. Yeah, you do practice for maybe 2 hours a day. I was a college athlete myself. I had two practices, or I'd have a 2 hour practice and maybe a lift in a day, so maybe 3 hours of physical activity. But the rest of the day I was like going to class and it was kind of relaxing. But camp, you are on your feet, you're moving, you're playing, and especially during staff training because you're getting from A to B and doing things. Um, so your time is just filled from sunrise to sunset in a lot of cases, and it's a physically demanding thing. And not only that, but you only have so much of it, right? Like Matt and I are going to talk a lot about the amount of information, and we'll talk about it when it comes to mental part of this. But physically, there's only so many hours, so many minutes in a day. And I actually encourage you to really use all of that. Camp training will cover a lot of that. Hey, these are the things you need to know. This is the information, but practice during that time too. Like if they teach you how to tie a knot, get some rope, learn like after the day is done, practice tying that knot. If there's a song, like sing it, like go to the showers and like sing at the end of the camp day with everybody in the showers, like the Tim the Turtle song, right? So that everybody is enjoying that. And those things come through play, right? That's the number one thing that you want to practice when you're not on schedule is how do you and your friends who are going through the staff training together find the fun all the time? And that's something you practice. And physically, it has to happen, right? You need to be singing, you need to be tying those knots, you need to be um practicing, explaining the rules of stuff, right? To make it simple and easy for kids to understand. You know, uh, we used to have competition, which was like, what's the least number of sentences you could use to explain the game of capture the flag? And then what's the least number of words, right? Like, how clear cut can you be in describing things so that kids can understand and put it in their mental level? And that's time and it's physically demanding. You need to put that time in. So, um, that's my first one. Matt, do you want to take number two? What's your advice for when it comes to physical stuff?
Yeah, and I guess remembering that we can't tell you exactly what your staff training is going to look like, and you can ask. I would always say if you're feeling like nervous or not sure what to expect, ask, reach out to your directing team, and they'll be able to shed some light on. Maybe they have a soft copy of the schedule that they could share with you to see. But like Oliver said, it's morning tonight, and the thing to remember about all parts of staff training, and this will come up in the mental part as well, but that they're intentionally there. That camp directors often don't just throw something into the busy training schedule just for the sake of it. And even if something is super fun, it's fun for there's some teaching behind it. And usually your staff training will kind of follow the cadence of a camp day. Generally, for a lot of camps, that's kind of how they run it, so that you can kind of get used to it as well. And I think Oliver, you're totally right in terms of just being prepared for the amount of time that goes into it, and just being prepared that your body and yes, your brain, but your body will feel tired from those kinds of things. So I think my kind of, we'll talk about tips too, but my tip in there too is to make sure that you are getting what you need from from your what like listening to your body, but also recognize that you got to be awake and you have to be present at sessions. This is not the time to be nodding off or to be like disengaged from training. And so if you could do some stuff now to prepare for that, just work on like taking some TED Talks or read your staff manual and just practice, get in the mindset of being awake and engaged. And also just listening to your body too. And when you're feeling tired, people are going to want to hang out at the end of the day at staff training. Like, they're going to want to play cards or play board games if you're an overnight camp, especially, or if you're a day camp and you're going home every day. Really, think about what you're doing in the evenings and if you're giving yourself that proper rest. The last thing that you would ever want is to show up to a day of staff training hungover. Like, I can't, if you're a day camp and you can go home, I mean, definitely, obviously, no substance on campsite, but if you're showing up like that, then you a are not prepared, and b are showing that you're not ready to take this seriously, and it's serious. We're dealing with other people's kids here.
Yeah. I know a great camp director who said, I'm not going to fire you for what you did last night, but I'm going to fire you for the way you showed up today, right? And if you're showing up hungover, well, I'm probably not going to want to keep you on my staff, especially if I see that warning sign during staff training.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I kind of put out there for especially overnight camp, having this experience, thinking back on my younger days, there's a lot of FOMO at night, right? Like you're wrapping up the day, like you've been
Hmm.
together all day. It's really tough for people to separate, go back to their cabins. So right, like that board game is going to take you, like it's play, it's good, it's one of those things that I talked about that you want to do, but it might take you till like 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't tell you how many times I've seen like a young counselor. Usually it's flirting and they're standing outside of a cabin and it's the first, it's like week one of staff training and they're standing outside of a cabin and they're not willing to say goodbye to each other. Right. And it's just like, hey, look, just go to bed. Like you two can flirt tomorrow, whatever it might be. I understand. Like I've been in that boat. I will also admit that I've probably stayed up late flirting as well. Um, but think about that as well, like regard those times, understand, but it is a big part of your life too, so make sure you're waking up the next day ready to go.
Oh, that's good advice too. And I can also say that, like, for those of you who do morning workouts, if you like to go for a run on the morning or you like to do something really physically strenuous, I would just evaluate why you're doing that. Because some people can be successful that way, but if you start your first day of staff, like the first morning of staff training with like a huge run, you might not be ready for how physically, like Oliver, you said it great at the start. It's differently tiring than running, than running a marathon or being a college athlete or whatnot. So just, maybe dial your distance back a little bit, or swap in, some mindfulness, some meditation or something like that that will give you a little bit more physical juice. And then, you know, don't break your habits, but just be realistic, because the rest of your day is going to be drastically different than it was when you're going for a run at home. So thank you for helping me remember that point.
Yeah, and then I do have one more piece of advice. This is kind of, it's a little isolating. It doesn't mean that they're the only ones, but seasonal leadership team, right? That like coordinator team, they're in charge of like groups and stuff, or maybe programs. They're maybe not in ratio. They're not counselors. They're seasonal leadership. Um, don't live off of caffeine and snack food. And look, I know those positions as well, right? You are working all day to run staff training, and then once everybody else finishes for the day, you're heading to the office to start prepping for the next day, right? Like, and then all of a sudden you're drinking Celsiuses or your Monsters or your Red Bulls or whatever to keep yourself up and running, and you're eating like things that are just not healthy options to keep
Yeah.
yourself right, eating, and it's killing you, right? Like you're going to be more tired when you get to summer because you just haven't. If you have the chance, right, work on things before you arrive, and get the things ready that you're gonna need. And even if you don't know what's happening for staff training yet, usually in those leadership positions you've been to camp before, you've gone through training, so think about the things that you might be able to prep on your own, like if you are running a training, or if you are part of like the team that um, makes sure that there's enough first aid equipment and stuff on camp, whatever it
Yep.
might be. What can you start prepping now? Because it's going to make your life a lot easier when you get to it, right? Like, especially like schedules and things like this. So, are there lesson plans, evening programs that you can prep? Get those things done earlier so that
Yeah.
you're ready to go through staff training and get it done because it's too much. So it kills you.
Yeah. We
So don't live off that caffeine.
we just released a podcast on the Camp Hacker feed, Oliver. That was like 13 tips from podcasters to camp pros. And Beth Allison from Camp Code had a nugget of wisdom, if you can believe it, that Beth said something smart. Of course, Beth said something smart. She said like finish staff training. This is tip for directors, but I think you're right for the seasonal leaders too. Get your stuff done before staff training so that you can just be present and you can relax. I think that was one of my biggest downfalls as a camp director was that almost every evening I had to take myself away from hanging out with the staff and or going to bed because I had next day's training to like polish up and work on.
Yeah, and it becomes this dynamic with that leadership team, right? Too like there's these people who might feel like they're unprepared and like going into that office and having that culture and that expectation that that needs to get done versus the people who might have like prepped earlier, right? And they're hanging out with staff and now it kind of becomes this war of like, well, like I've done what I need to do and I haven't done what I need to do, or we need to do this. So you need to come and be a part of this boat, right?
Yeah.
It's really challenging. So you need to communicate with your co-leadership staff on what those things are and being there to help them. It's a whole team effort, right?
Yeah.
Just because somebody is in charge of say like high ropes or your youngest age group or whatever it might be, um, the expectation is you guys are working as a team, so that leadership works together, right? And
Yeah.
that's an important thing to communicate. So if you know you have a co who's going to need help on those things, a co-leadership staff member, you got to be there to help them and help them get things ready for summer too, so that all of you are able to enjoy that time with staff, and
Mm.
you're not pulling each other down or making each other feel guilty or whatever it might be. It's one of the roughest things, especially with young leadership staff, where you might be seeing a lot of turnover coming in. That change is really tough. So, Matt, you got one more.
Yeah, the, oh man, this I love the direction this conversation's going and so I just want to sneak one more in before we move on. Um, in terms of what to expect, when you are in school, learning and training usually looks like lecture style. Sometimes you might have a lab. If you're like, I was a music student, we'll have like band practice. That's part of a class. Um, so you can expect a bunch of different styles of teaching in staff training, and you're going to get some probably really great, well facilitated, really polished, engaging sessions where you're like up talking to groups and you're doing things like that. And sometimes you don't have control over how good your facilitator is. So sometimes you might have a session that's a little more lecture style. You can only make like health and safety so engaging and exciting. Sometimes it's just content that you have to listen to and you have to absorb. So you don't necessarily have the choice. Well, you don't usually as a younger staff how you're going to get that training, but you still have to make sure that you are paying attention and you're engaged. And the reason is because I don't think this is a dirty secret, but and I don't want this to sound like Big Brother is watching you kind of thing, but the camp directors, the admin, and the leadership staff are paying attention to how you are doing during staff training. It's still an extension of the job interview in the same way that your day to day work at camp is still an extension of your job interview. We want the best people at camp, so we want you to take it seriously. In the same message as the like being hungover or like falling asleep during sessions, we want you to be contributing and actively on. And if you are talking about stuff that is like not camp appropriate, even at a mealtime, or you're playing music if you're doing group work, and you're like playing music that has a ton of like content that's not appropriate for camp, or if you're doing things that are like questionable and you're like, oh well, we're not going to do it when the kids are here. This is training. You have to train to like the kids are here. So just you should be practicing always being on. I put in quotation marks. With the knowledge and incentive that your camp directors are also expecting you to be on. So, I don't mean to be like everyone's watching you, but they are. People are looking at how safe you will be with kids.
Yeah. Like think about yourself as that Disney princess, right? I think a lot of people have probably heard about the whole like Disney princesses, they don't smoke walking around Disney, right? Like it would
Mm.
ruin the image, right? You got to practice that, right? So if you're somebody who maybe swears a lot, right? You got to figure out what that language is. If you're somebody whose body language really struggles sometimes to show you're alert and attentive, you gotta work on that. And staff training is the place to do it, to be cognizant of it. It adds another thing. You're practicing to be that role model for kids. So, all right. Now, that's a lot of physical stuff, right? Like we're talking about being there, being present, body language was something I just mentioned, how you're taking care of your body. Those are physical things, all truly important. But staff training is also about the mind. We are trying to upload so much information into your head as a young camp professional. It's like exams week in university where you are just cramming for those tests, right? And the test is when kids show up, right? It's not a paper, multiple choice, short answer test you're going to take at the end of the week. It is a kid shows up and you're responsible for them. So it is honestly a much, much more difficult test at the end of it. And you're still learning at that point, right? So let's talk about the mental expectations of staff training and what goes into them. So um, I'll kick us off. And the first thing I want to say is don't be scared about what you don't know, right? Like we're gearing up for staff training, and a lot of the questions I get are, I'm not a lifeguard. Do I need to learn how to be a lifeguard? Or I don't know how to do high ropes. I've never done something like that before. Or um, are you going to teach us about behavior management and taking care of the kids? Like, yes, yes, those things are all part of staff training. We as a camp are going to train you on how to do these things. And that might not be the case for a lot of camps. Some camps might hire someone in as a lifeguard. They have an expectation that you know how to lifeguard when you come in. They will teach you their in-house information. But Matt kind of mentioned this earlier. If you need that reassurance, if you're emotionally struggling with what might be happening at staff training, get that soft schedule maybe so you can get an idea of some of the things that might be happening, but mentally like understand the information you're going to need, you're going to get during staff training. Don't worry about what you don't know, worry about learning the information that's going to be provided to you and how you're going to collect that information. I'll talk about how that's collected in a little bit and some of my advice there, but that fear of not knowing, don't worry about it as much. That's why you're going to train. You're going to learn, and that's the whole point. So Matt, what do you want to kick off with when it comes to this, the mentality of staff training?
Mm. It, I think that's a really good point, Oliver. The fear of not knowing, because the reality is that you won't know everything. And you know that I think it's what's the Mike Tyson quote. I know Mike Tyson's not the most like model figure of greatness, but he has the quote that everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, and like that, your first group of campers is going to be like a bit of a punch in the face because it's not going to be the exact way you learned it in staff training, and part of being a great counselor is just being open to consistently learning, and hopefully the culture at your camp and a lot of camps is that if you we've talked about this on the podcast before, but if you like give a crap and you try to take everything as a learning opportunity, camp will help you. There will be support systems. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not important to like turn your brain off, or it's important that you keep your brain on for all of these sessions, because staff training is a lot of information, and as intentionally as we try to place all the information in staff training, you're going to be doing a lot of like topic switching. You're going to cover health and safety. There's going to be some abuse prevention stuff in there. There's going to be how to run programs, how to take care of campers. You're going to have your specialty stuff if you're a programmer and you're doing program area stuff. There might be some like site work mixed into that. You might be digging a hole because camp needs a hole dug, and a lot of people make for light work. And you're going to be just like switching off. There'll be meals interspersed. There'll be some time to rest and there'll be downtimes, but just you got to be ready that it's going to be super dynamic. And also not just the learning is dynamic, but the like socialization, the making friends with your fellow staff is all intertwined in with that. And you're going to be building relationships kind of on the fly too. And I think it's important to take advantage of those opportunities to build those relationships, but just be prepared that there's a lot coming in a lot of different directions from staff training, and there's almost nothing that we can do. I think every camp director out there would tell you that they wish staff training was like a month long, and because you just can't cover everything. So we do our best. And so just kind of be along for the ride. And if you're in your head, you're like, man, this is a lot. You're right. It's a lot. And that's okay. You'll figure out the stuff that you should really remember, and then you'll get it more your second year, right? After you've had 8 or 9 weeks of cabins of kids rotating through your room. So
Yeah. And remember, like camp is experiential learning, right? So,
yeah,
that the staff training might feel extremely fast paced and that there's a lot of information coming at you from a lot of directions. Uh, I would almost argue at times it's intentional, right? Like I would love a month for staff training, but I also know that whatever I taught you day one might not be in your head when the kids arrive,
yeah,
right?
true.
Whereas, something that you went through last week is a little bit more prevalent in your brain. Even if it was only an hour, you've got the core concepts to work through. Um, I'd still love that month. Man, that'd be a great month of staff training.
It'd be fun.
I don't know how many camps have the budget for that though. Just
You're
a,
right.
a month
Yeah,
of
yeah,
unpaid or no income, just staff training. Um, so, what I want to kind of go into for mentally right now is a little bit of my tip of advice, and that's you've learned how to learn. All right, right? Like you've been going to school your whole life, or you've been getting an education in some form. They've taught you learning techniques, right? They have taught you, different mnemonic devices, right? So, and some of the information that camp will provide will be in learning functioning ways, right? It will be an acronym, so you can remember an acronym. There'll be things listed out so it's easier to understand.
yeah.
You'll get definitions of key terms. You'll get reading materials, multimedia. Like great camps will expose you to a lot of different learning devices. It's your job to understand that you've learned how to learn and will put those into practice, right? So if you're sitting there in staff training, you're kind of just nodding your head and going along with the training, you're not going to get that information. You need to be active, right? You've probably heard the term active learner.
Yeah.
So here's how some of those things look so that while you're in staff training, you know that you are participating in the right way. So one, if it's like a lecture and you're sitting there and someone's giving you information, there's a PowerPoint. Are you taking notes? Are
Right.
you writing that down? Are you putting it in a place where you can come back to it later? Um, I'm not going to talk poorly, but I was just in a training that was like trauma therapy training or essentially trauma informed care for kids who may have gone through more traumatic experiences in their lives. Um, and I'm sitting here and I'm taking notes, and I am in a room of other professionals, and two other people took out a notepad out of like 50 people. And I'm just like, what? You're not going to get this information. You're not going to keep it. I took over 15 pages of notes during this like 3 hour course. And now I have that information to pull back on. It's saved onto my computer. It's a resource now that I can come back to. It's not just a course I went to for a few hours and I can remember three main things from it that the speaker kind of indulged me on. I have the information. I can come back to it. And not only that, but like once I finish, like at the bottom, I've put down a brief summary of what I got out of the course,
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
So now I've recapped what I thought was important or things that the instructor really emphasized. So it's not just plain notes that I come back and I don't understand. I can go back, see that summary, and go, "Oh, I remember that now. I remember giving myself a feedback." So, hey, take notes, people. Please just have a notepad, have your laptop out if your camp is a little more tech friendly, or a tablet if that works for you. I've had staff take notes through their phone and stuff. Take the notes. It's another way of putting it in your brain, right? And that aspect of writing it down helps cement it there. The next thing is be active, right? Asking questions, volunteering and getting up there to participate, singing those songs, playing those games, being involved. That is part of that learning process, right? So Be a part of it. I'm gonna give you the really big tricks when we get to the E.G.E.L today, so that's a little bit of a holder for you guys.
Mm,
But being practiced and being involved is really important as well. So those are learning things. But the number one thing is Matt's already indulged you with the idea that there's gonna be so much information coming at me. The last thing you need to really think about is what's your processing method, right? Because at
mm,
the end of the day, you're gonna get all this information, you're gonna get all this stuff, but you're gonna be faced in situations on camp where you don't know what to do. There was no exact training on it. There was no conversation with how to handle these situations. So you have to have questions that you ask yourself in those situations that set you up for success. So I'll shout out real quick Beth Allison and Travis. They have their 4 S's. These are classic Go Camp Pro ones that you can always go back to. Is it safe? Is it good stewardship? Does it build a person's self esteem? Are you being a servant to others? Those are their 4 S's. I did have a cheat sheet. But they're great questions to be asking yourself. And if you're getting coached in those things, they're ones you can use. Here at Westwood, we are using: is it safe? Is it efficient? Is it efficient? Does it reflect our values? Is it fun? These are core questions that we ask ourselves. We actually have a fifth one. I'm spacing on it right now. I think it's: is it magical? So we have our questions. So when our staff are put in that situation where they're, you know, running late for something, or they don't exactly know how this program is supposed to run, right? They can start asking themselves those questions, and when they answer it in their head, they figure out how they're going to function, right? Is this efficient? Well, I'm using 5 gallons of paint to paint 1 square foot of wood. Maybe that's too much paint. That is not an efficient use of materials, right? So these are things that we want them to ask, because the important thing for us as a leaders here at camp and teaching leaders is: how do we create independent thinkers? How do we create people who are going to have autonomy to operate on their own? And if you find a base for yourself, these questions, even if your camp doesn't provide them, try to find a way to create them yourself during staff training so you can have deductive reasoning as you go through summer. And you're going to feel more prepared because you'll pull back on staff training, right? Does it reflect our values? Like here at the Y, all right, cool. During staff training, they talked about honesty, respect, responsibility, and caring. Now I'm playing this game and my kids are bullying each other. That doesn't seem like it's following our values. So how do I now answer this question of like, okay, this is not reflecting our values. How do I go about handling this? Well, I needed to be such and such, and now we're going to do such and such to remedy this. Or I'm entering this program. How do I use these questions to prevent such things or to include such things, right? Like if I'm going to
yeah.
go and play basketball, right, and I want to make sure that we are doing respect, I make sure that in my pitch to my campers or my explanation of the rules is something that forms respect, right? Like, hey, you guys, like this is not a physical game. Basketball is not a contact sport. It's not respectful to, throw elbows or pushing or, pop somebody else's ball across the court or kick it across the court. So I want to make sure that we're all good sportsmen here. That's what it is. So find your reasoning, find your questions that you ask yourself, and cement those so that you can be a deductive and autonomous leader at camp this summer. So, Matt, what else you got?
Those are so good, Oliver. I don't think I have much more to add. Just two quick ones. One tip. This works for me. Might not work for everybody, but I think sometimes I need like extrinsic motivation to be on my like best behavior during a session or a lesson or something like that. And so what I do for that, I think I learned this like growing up going to church. I had to sit in the front. So often, if I'm like feeling a little sluggish or need to like mentally engage myself, I put myself in the front row. Maybe not directly front and center, but like off to the front, certainly, and off to the side, certainly in the front row. And that helps me remember that there's people watching what I do. But also, I try to really show a lot of gratitude to the presenter that I really care about what they're giving. So yeah, I do nod along, but I'm taking notes and I'm nodding along because that also helps. That feels good as a presenter, and hopefully, many people who listen to this podcast will become camp directors or are camp directors. And it just, Oliver, you know this, how good it feels when someone is like really engaged and like, oh yeah, they find that interesting, and it feels good. So that's a nice little way to help keep yourself engaged. Don't be fake about it. Don't use it to like, you know, kiss butt or anything like that, but I always found being in the front, taking notes. Sometimes I went through a year where I drew all my notes. Like I had a big, I think I still have it somewhere behind me here. It's like a big artist's book, and when I went to a conference one year, I drew all my notes. I still had words in there, but I like made mind maps and stuff like that, and that was a cool way of keeping my brain engaged differently. So that might work for you. And the last thing I'll say is that in the mental, we talked a little bit about this in the physical sense, but in the mental space, um, it takes practice to get good at some of these things. And just like tying a knot, like when you're an adventure staff, you got to tie your double figure eight, and you'll get good at that throughout the summer. But, if there's an area of development that you really want to get better in, and if you notice, bullying behavior happen, or a kid who's left out, or engaging with a quiet kid, that can be really hard. You see a kid off to the side looking sad, you know, the approach, the technique to go speak to that kid is not an intuitive one, right? It's not one that you might know right off the bat, but it's something you might learn in staff training. That might be what they choose to focus on in your training. And if they give you a technique, you got to practice it. Just learning and hearing it for the first time is not going to work. So, role play is definitely important. And if a lot of great camp trainings will involve role play, or they'll give an opportunity to actually like have a kid react. I had a camp director once bring in their kid who like did a lot of acting during staff training, and it was amazing because when a kid tells you to f off for the first time, you want to be able to respond thoughtfully to that. So listen to a bunch of our other episodes on camper behavior and stuff like that, but just don't discount that you might need to practice. Pull aside another staff member and say, "Hey, I want to practice this thing that we learned." It'll feel nerdy, but that's what first class counselors do. You toe that line between cool and nerdy all the time.
Uh, yeah, I met someone the other day and I said, I'm definitely going to be weirder than you. Just get ready for it.
I love that.
All right. So we talked about physical, we talked about mentally being there for all of the stuff that's going to get thrown at you for camp and how to start recording that information in your head because that's what staff training is. It's a lot of learning. And honestly, it's probably one of for a camp director, it's one of the most important ones to make sure that when you walk out of staff training, you have that information. I think it's the one we hyper fixate on a lot, right? And then we also think, all right, is everyone physically ready for camp? Are they well rested? Or am I work like that's the secondary part. But then there's this third thing that we need to think about, and that's everyone's emotional well-being as they go through staff training. And what are some of those hurdles that you have to jump as you go through it? We talked about these a little bit earlier about handling like that FOMO, this feeling of missing out.
Mhm.
That's definitely an emotional part of it. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things that overcome you when you get into the emotional side of staff training. And I'm going to start with a really big one. I think this is a really common one, especially for returning staff. But new staff feel this too because they're coming into a new community, and that is changes, right? Emotionally, changes are so taxing, whether it's something you've never known and now you have to learn those ways and become a part of that community, or you have been a part of this community. There is a way that you know how to things do, or a culture that you expect that camp to have. And then all of a sudden, it's not what you expect, or it's difficult um, to become a part of that community. So changing is tough. So the first thing that I'm gonna say really hard here is every summer is different. And also a lot of people always say your first summer is the best summer, right? Oh, well, I mean, back in 2013, camp was the best camp would ever be. It's never been better since then. But the thought process you need to have and start it now is not that summer was the best summer. That summer was a building block to make sure that this summer is going to be the best summer ever. You have control over that. You do not
Mhm.
have control over how great last summer was. It's over. Maybe you can fake some stories in your head or embellish some old tales that make it sound like the greatest camp ever, and you forget some
Mhm.
of the bad stuff and you get through some of it and then it just fades. But this summer has to be the best summer ever. You have to have that mentality going into it. or you're going to just keep living on those like that past, right? Be realistic, right? Don't put yourself in a position where you can't succeed in your goals, but understand that camp's going to be different this year, and your goal is to be a part of that change. And I'm going to talk about that as my next little hint. But Matt, can you tell me a little bit about some of the emotional expectations that you have walking into staff training?
I really love what you said about change and how, it's easy to play the comparison game if you're a returning staff member. I also want to point out that if you're a new staff member, you talked to Oliver before about like what you have control over and what you don't have control over. When you're a new camp staff, you're going to be going into a community where more than likely there's going to be people who have been to camp together before. And if you are a returner, I think we might have said this at an old episode, but like you have to be aware of not being a exclusive clique and not talking about camp last summer and all these fun stories from camp and the best thing about camp people is that you can pick up after a whole year of not seeing each other and you're best friends again, but you need to be aware that you want the experience to be just as great for those new staff members as well. Now, if you're a new staff member, you don't have control necessarily about how other people act or how, what kind of culture the camp director has facilitated. For the camp directors listening, hopefully that you can send a little message to your returners and say, hey, I expect that we welcome the new staff, that we intentionally split ourselves up, and that you're giving reminders to staff to do that. So back if you're a new staff member, people might act like that. And that is a testament to how great the camp experience is that it brings people that close together. So I think just give yourself a little bit of grace and it's okay to like insert yourself into some situations with returners, but if you don't feel like perfectly included and like everyone's best friend right off the start, I would say A, don't force it, and B, just give yourself a little bit of grace and meet someone else new or take some time to like journal or take some time to process. If you don't instantly feel like you're part of the cool crowd, I have seen that be really emotionally tough for staff, and that's okay. Camp should be an inclusive place. You should be welcomed and included, but don't compare your relationship to ones of people that have been coming year after year, because that just I think it's setting yourself up for failure. And the other emotional thing kind of tied to this is that you're going to be living in community in a way that you likely haven't before. You may have attended, college or university, and you may have been part of a sorority or fraternity, or you might have done something similar before, where you stayed in a room with lots of people. Maybe you've done that, maybe you haven't, but that's going to be a new experience as well. So I think we will give some tips on this, but living in community is just hard. You're with people when they're at their best, when they're at their worst, they're most tired. People have different standards of how they keep the bathrooms that you share clean, and that is hard too. And I think that what you can control is how you show up as a community member, right? How you show up to conversations, what energy you bring into the room, how clean you keep your space, how clean you keep the bathroom. You have control over those things, and the less comparison games you play in your head with other people, then the better off I think you're going to emotionally be as you go through not just camp training, but the summer as a whole.
Yeah. I, I love when you're talking about like you're part of that community, and it means understanding like cleaning up your space and what those expectations are, right? Like those are all community markers, right? And you set the tone for that. Even if you're a new staff member, right? Like if you come in and you're, making sure you keep a clean bunk, even if you notice like maybe a former staff is not keeping it as clean, right? Like you can go in there and raise the bar in those kind of quiet ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as you're becoming a part of that community, your values and your good practices become part of it, right? Don't allow yourself though to fall into like this, oh well, they get away with cutting that corner, so maybe I can cut that corner too, right? As a
Yeah.
as a staff member, don't lower yourself because the expectations aren't always being directly like the camp director is not going to you know be everywhere in every place, holding every standard, right? Like you are coming in, and that's and it might be emotionally tough to say like, um, I don't want to let myself fall off the wagon of things that I've practiced and done well. And there's a lot of different things. Like I was just talking about like keeping your space clean, but you might enter a camp that has a different culture when it comes to like socializing, right? Like you might not be someone who likes to go out that much, and it might be a camp that maybe has like a pretty invested night out culture to them, or it might be the opposite, right? um at the end of the day, like yeah, I think Matt and I have said this 1,000 times on the podcast. Like you're there for the kids, you're there for that camp culture and your investment into it, and that's kind of what I want to get into. Is which camp is emotional because you are invested into it, right? You're putting your life essentially in one place for an entire summer.
Hmm.
You step away from a lot of things that are happening in your life to be a part of camp, right? Like you're not on the phone every day with mom and dad, or you're not seeing them every day. You might not be with your friends who are getting to go to the beach, or you might not have as much free time. So you're invested. And I think it's important that you got to understand that other people are putting that same investment into, right? At the end of the day, like everybody is putting themselves kind of whole into camp in whatever way is for them. And understand that like everybody carries their own luggage that you might not be able to see, and you got to take that time to understand them, understand what their motives are, their reasoning, why they're doing things certain ways, so that you can work with them. So I think that emotional part of camp is huge, because I think a big thing about how camps function is this understanding of each other and what each person's story is. Um, and treating everybody as the individual. Now, don't get me wrong, there are expectations that everyone's supposed to follow, like being on time and following camp code of conduct. But also it's, why does somebody maybe approach situations in a different way? Some people who are better in one-on-one situations with campers versus somebody who's better at like getting up on stage. Like those are different ways that people invest themselves, and you got to understand what their strengths are, and understand that like maybe you got to cover some other people's weaknesses sometimes with what your
Hmm.
strengths are.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have a pair of people who both have the same weakness, and they got to figure out how to make that work, right? And getting through to people a lot of the time is understanding, what are they going through. And in fact, I just listened to a
Hmm.
great podcast, and this is a walk between the two. But one of the greatest ways that humans show their love, caring, and affection for another person is through what kind of sacrifices that they put forward for other people. It's a very strange thing to know that like we identify what other people give up for us, but it's also one of the strongest markers in understanding why someone cares about us so much. Like what were they able to give up for me? Um, that's not a toxic trait. It can become that.
Hmm.
Please note that is very important. But it's one of those scientifically proven ways that people show, hey, I'm invested. I'm here for this, and this is what I was willing to give up in order to be here for that. So it's emotional, it's difficult, and just know where that's coming from.
Oh man, I love this podcast. Is my favorite thing. One of my favorite things to do, Oliver, because we get so deep on things that mean so much, and I think it's really important. That you have to give people a lot of grace when you work this close with them, and it is totally different than most other jobs out there. Um, Again, just because when you're living in community, and you gotta recognize that people need different things, and that's okay. And being how can you be of service, right? There's that one of the four S's is how am I serving the community, and I think that speaks to it right there. The last thing that I want people to think about emotionally here is that it is likely, especially in your first year, that you are going to feel some sort of imposter syndrome or overwhelm during staff training. That the idea of a cabin of kids coming your way or looking at the schedule and thinking about what's to come, that you are going to feel overwhelmed and you're going to feel like, how can I be this person? I'm in the wrong job. I'm in the wrong place. I can't do this. I'm out. And you might be tempted to tap out. And what I would encourage you to do is just think about all the times where you have felt that before and that you have persevered and that you've grown alongside of it. You can do this. And to feel that way is to know how much you care about that. And Oliver, we've talked about it a couple of times so far. You're going to learn on the go. Camp is experiential, and remember, I think we talked about this in the like what to expect more generally of working at camp, but you know, people are there for your success as well. The job of a supervisor at camp is different than a job of a supervisor, at a fast food restaurant where they're kind of looking at your productivity and how much you're smiling. I think that a great camp director and a great supervisor is a coach, and they're there to look at where you're at. And it takes a lot to fire somebody. It's the last thing that we want to do as camp directors, because we do believe that camp can be a place for people, and if you genuinely care, and I think that you show some improvement, that you work at where maybe your weaknesses are, and you care about showing up, then we're going to work with you. Great camp directors will. I can't guarantee for every experience, but I think if your camp director is one that listens to podcasts like this, I think that they care, and they want to see you grow. So just remember that if you make a mistake, it's okay. And if you only can take away so much of training, just remember what's going to keep the kids safe, what's going to get us there, and what's going to keep them safe, what's going to keep them happy, and what's going to keep them safe. Like if you keep them safe at the end of the week and you're not a jerk to them and you help them build connections with each other, and I think, and they want to come back to camp, you've done great. If you can't remember all the words to Great Big Moose, then that's okay. You'll be fine. So give yourself a little bit of grace.
Yeah. In fact, if you can't remember every word to Great Big Moose and you just get up there and you give it your best, sometimes that even has a better effect, right?
Yeah,
I know I have messed up plenty of camp songs. You just kind of go for it.
yeah.
But you guys, that is our information today about that what to expect when you're expecting staff training. Getting back to it. But we don't end the show just there. We do have our E.G.E.L time, which is our ever growing, ever learning. It's a trick, a tip, a game, or a song for counselors to be better every day. So, Matt, let's talk a little bit about our E.G.E.Ls today. Do you have yours?
I do have mine. So the this might not be a new thing to people, but as you prepare for camp, specifically staff training, let's keep it staff training focused. Um, I think getting a fidget toy or tool can be something that is really helpful for staying attentive during sessions. And now, not every fidget toy is the same or is worthy, I think, of being called a fidget toy. I think that a great fidget tool is something that you can use in one hand, so that you can still take notes if you're available with your other hand can do that. It doesn't take away from your ability to learn from the session, especially if taking notes or participating is important. It is silent, so it's not, if it's one of those like pop it things, it's not super loud and you can't hear it, or one of those like clicker cubes. You shouldn't be disturbing other people, and it's a solo toy. It's not something that you're just gonna like give to somebody or share, that it's gonna distract somebody else. So one-handed, silent, solo fidget tool can just be helpful. Now sometimes you can have one that's going to be two hands, and if that's like a little piece of practice rope, but again, it's not something that should be taking your attention away. So if you can tie a one-handed bowline without having to look down and break your attention, super. That's a fidget. If you're learning your figure eight and practicing it while you're supposed to be learning about abuse prevention, not a great fidget. So find a fidget. I definitely love like Play-Doh, or silly putty is a perfect one for that. That you can just kind of squish it, move it through your hands. Even if you drop it, it's not making sound.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of staff members with like jewelry. They wear rings or a bracelet and they kind of just like spin it around their finger or something like that too. That's a
Yeah,
really simple thing. It doesn't always have to be a toy. Sometimes it's just something that's there, right? Like you guys can't see my hands, but like pretty much the whole entire podcast, my hands sit down here and they're playing with something. It's a little bit because like I have some ancestry that we talk a lot with our hands. So so trying to keep those under control. You might see my fingers come up sometimes, but just trying to do my best there to hold back a little. But so my eggle is a long time ago. Somebody showed me this. It's from the University of Alabama. I think it was made from like the National Training Laboratory. I did have to look some of this up so I wouldn't forget it. But it's called the Learning Pyramid. I think it's so perfect for staff training. I do not know if it has been completely scientifically proven or if it's super, super accurate, but it is a great guide. That's what I'm going to say. And it's something that I've stuck to. So, they used to research like how do people retain information and what type of learning styles are best. There was a lot of, discussion about whether they're kinesthetic, like hands-on learning, or auditory or visual. And some of that is up for debate. But we do know that stacking those things can allow people to retain information better. So if you do two, you're going to be better at learning. But there's also this thing that I once saw, and it's always stuck with me a little bit. And for some reason, it just works for me. I find that it's pretty accurate. You might shift some things around a bit for yourself. But the learning pyramid essentially, and Matt has already linked it in the show notes for you guys, so you got it there. But it's a pyramid, and it has essentially starting from the top and then works its way down. I've also seen it reversed, but it's about how well you can retain information. It gives you general percentages of how that information is retained based off of their learning style, right? So if somebody just goes up and talks to you in front of a class, like a lecture, that may only allow someone to retain 5%. You're not taking notes, you're just listening to somebody talk. If somebody asks you about it an hour later, you'll be able to get, 5% of whatever they talked about to a degree. Whereas when you head down this pyramid, things would get retained a little bit better. So if you read the information, say from a book or online or whatever it might be, that article you might get 10% or a good understanding of it. Next would be audio visual. I've seen someone practice it, right? So, like for example, with Westwood, our all of our programs, if you click on your schedule, if you're on your schedule and you click on that program, it brings up a an entire file that's a lesson plan and has a visual learning device in there. So the next is 30% for demonstration, and then discussion, and then 75% for practicing and doing, and then finally 90% when you're actually somebody who teaches other people. So you are leading the instruction, you learn a lot more. So these are really great because you start to find out that practice and doing the thing, you need to retain the information in order to do it, right? You can't teach others if you really don't know the information. So now you've had to learn it so well that you can go up, instruct it, teach it, put the information across to other people, be questioned on it, um, you know, and be able to answer and continue explaining these things. So I've always been a big fan of it because for me, when I'm thinking about staff training and how I'm planning my lessons, how far down that pyramid can I get so that I know people are truly going to retain that information and be able to practice it come summer. So for you as a counselor, you might see like, well, do I need to practice this a little bit more? Or do I need to have discussion with a friend about it, right? So I can retain my information better. Or if you are somebody who's maybe on leadership staff, you start to think, well, like, how am I going to run my training to make sure that my staff are able to retain this better? And maybe that means we have to get to a point of, discussion. But understand, like, stacking these up, getting down to that bottom of the pyramid and having that strong base of information means a lot of time goes into that learning, a lot more action goes into it, right? Um, it's a great learning device. It's great for teachers as well. So take advantage of it. It's one of those things that's always been in the back of my head. So
Mm.
um, any final words, Matt?
The learning period is brilliant, and I just the note I made for our show notes, which you can check out at gocamp.pro/FCC. I said like you can help others stack those things, right? If your session, again, you can't control how your session is delivered to you, but you can take notes, and that's another way of engaging, like you said, stacking those learning methods, or you can explain it to others. And again, great staff training facilitators will do a lot of this stuff on their own, but sometimes take it into your own hands, and that can help you really solidify some of those um, that muscle memory that we talked about.
Yeah. And you can take a lot of things to your hands, right? Like you get that lecture from your director, and then, you know, there might be a reading on it. You can go online, find an article, find a video to watch. And you know, at that point you're getting pretty far down that pyramid. And if you're having those discussions with your fellow staff, I mean, you're going to be retaining that information a lot better than if you just sat through that lecture, right? And you know, you bottled it in and bottled it out and moved on, right? Like keeping it active. That's the important thing here. So, but those are our egos. If you enjoyed today's show, we'd be so grateful if you left us a review for wherever you are listening to this podcast. Your ratings and reviews not only tell us what you like or don't like about the show, but also helps boost our rankings and helps more people discover the show.
Also, don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/FCC. I will post the link of the learning pyramid there. I'll post the 4S test that Oliver talked about earlier. And you can find all of our past show notes by going to gocamp.pro/FCC.
Yep. It was a great show tonight. It was nice to be back with you, Matt. Congratulations again for fatherhood. And remember, camp is camp, and camp is all good.
If we don't see you until next September, have a great summer, everybody. Kick some butt out there. Go change some lives.